What's up, everybody? Today's story is about a guy with a documented medical condition who had a simple workplace accommodation. He kept his medication at his desk and took short breaks when needed. Worked fine for 5 years. Then a new department head rolled in with a clean desk policy and locked all personal items in a storage cabinet, including his medication. When our guy had a medical episode and couldn't access his meds, he ended up in the hospital. From the hospital bed, he called an employment attorney. The lawsuit targeted both the manager and the company for ADA violations. The manager got fired. The company settled for 6 figures. And the clean desk policy mysteriously disappeared. This is what happens when someone confuses tidiness with power. Let's get into it. My new department head locked my medication in a cabinet as part of his clean desk policy. I had a medical episode and couldn't access it. From the hospital bed, I called an attorney. He got fired. The company settled. I want to start by saying I'm not a litigious person. I've never sued anyone. I've never threatened to sue anyone. The word attorney wasn't in my vocabulary until about 8 months ago, when a man I'd known for 3 weeks decided that my medical needs were less important than the appearance of his department's desks. What happened next was the most stressful, painful, and ultimately vindicating experience of my life. My name's Jake. I'm 37. I worked, I'll get to that, as a data reconciliation specialist for a financial services firm. Not the flashy Wall Street kind, the boring back office kind where we make sure the numbers in System A match the numbers in System B and investigate the ones that don't. It's tedious, it's detail-oriented, and it requires long stretches of focused concentration, which is relevant because of my medical condition. I have severe asthma, not the I need a puff before running a mile kind. The my airways can close without warning, and if I don't have my rescue inhaler within 2 to 3 minutes, I'm looking at a medical emergency kind. I've had it since I was about 7. First diagnosis came after I collapsed at a family picnic. Couldn't breathe, turned blue, whole 9 yards. My mom carried me to the car. Dad drove to the ER going about 90. I was hospitalized twice as a teenager. Once at a baseball game, I was in the stands, not even playing, and the heat and humidity triggered an episode that put me in the ER for 4 hours. The second time was at school, sophomore year, when a substitute teacher took my inhaler because she thought I was playing with it during class. That one ended with an ambulance. My mom sued the school district. They settled. I'd like to think I learned from that experience. Turns out the universe had a second lesson planned. For the 5 years I worked at the firm, my asthma was managed and documented. HR had my medical information on file. My direct supervisor, a woman named Patricia, who managed the reconciliation team for 8 years, knew about my condition and accommodated it without issue. The accommodation was simple. I kept my rescue inhaler at my desk within arm's reach at all times. I also had a secondary inhaler in my bag and a third in my car. 3 inhalers, 3 locations. Because when you've been hospitalized for not having one, you learn to be redundant. I also had an informal understanding, approved by Patricia and documented in my employee file, that I could take short, unscheduled breaks if I felt an episode coming on. These were rare, maybe once a month, sometimes less. I'd step away from my desk for 3 to 5 minutes, use my inhaler in the restroom or a quiet area, and come back. Nobody on the team cared. Nobody was affected. The work got done. My performance reviews were consistently meets or exceeds expectations, 5 years in a row. Patricia understood because Patricia had seen an episode firsthand. About 2 years into my time at the firm, I had a moderate attack at my desk, triggered by a cleaning product someone had used in the nearby conference room. The fumes hit my airways, and within 60 seconds, I was reaching for my inhaler. Patricia was walking past and saw the whole thing. The grab, the shake, the 2 puffs, the 30 seconds of sitting perfectly still, waiting for the medication to work. She stood there until I gave her a thumbs up. Then she said, "Jake, I'm going to have facilities switch to fragrance-free products in this area." She didn't ask permission from anyone. She just did it. That's leadership. That's a manager who sees a problem and fixes it without turning it into a committee meeting. She also, without me asking, added a note to my file that said, "Employee's rescue inhaler must remain accessible at his workstation at all times. This is non-negotiable per medical documentation." I found out about that note later, during the legal process, and I almost cried. Patricia had protected me in writing before she left. She knew someone else would take over. She wanted to make sure the next person understood. She did everything right. The problem was that the next person didn't read the file. Then Patricia retired. Hold on, this is me, not Jake. I want to set something up here. Jake has a life-threatening medical condition. It's documented. It's on file with HR. His accommodation is keeping an inhaler at his desk. That's it. Not a special office. Not reduced hours. Not a standing desk or a white noise machine or any of the things people sometimes ask for. A small plastic device that fits in his hand. And for 5 years, everyone was fine with it because everyone was a reasonable human being. Patricia understood. The team understood. HR understood. But Patricia's gone now. And whoever's coming next, they don't know Jake. They don't know asthma. And they apparently don't know the ADA. I'm calling the new guy Captain Clean Desk, because in about 5 minutes, he's going to learn that you can't organize your way out of a federal lawsuit. Buckle up. Patricia's replacement was a guy I'll call Grant. Grant came from a different division, corporate reporting, I think. He'd been with the company for about 2 years, but had no experience managing people who did what we did. He was 40-ish, wore vests over button-downs, always vests, and had the energy of someone who'd just finished reading a book about lean management and was looking for somewhere to apply it. His first week was a listening tour. He met with each team member individually. When he met with me, I told him about my condition. I said, I have severe asthma. My accommodation is keeping my inhaler at my desk. It's documented with HR. Patricia was aware. He nodded and made a note on his iPad. He said, noted. Thanks for sharing, Jake. That was it. I thought we were good. We were not good. 3 weeks into Grant's tenure, he announced a departmental efficiency initiative. This included a new filing system, fine, updated report templates, fine, mandatory daily stand-up meetings at 8:15 a.m., annoying but fine, and, wait for it, a clean desk policy. The clean desk policy, as Grant described it in an email to the team, required that all personal items be removed from desks at the end of each workday. Personal items included photos, plants, coffee mugs, snacks, personal electronics, and any items not directly related to company business. Everything was to be stored in personal lockers that had been installed in the break room, small metal cabinets about 2 feet by 2 feet with combination locks. I read the email twice. Then I walked to Grant's office. I said, Grant, my inhaler needs to stay at my desk. It's a medical accommodation. He said, Jake, the policy applies to everyone equally. We can't make exceptions without undermining the standard. I said, it's not an exception, it's a legal accommodation under the ADA. He said, and I want to make sure I quote this accurately because it became important later. I understand your concern, but the locker is just down the hall. If you need your inhaler, you can walk to the break room and get it. It takes 30 seconds. 30 seconds. To a guy who's told him his airways can close in 2 to 3 minutes. 30 seconds to walk down a hall, open a combination lock, retrieve an inhaler, and get back to breathing. During an active asthma attack, when your chest is tightening, your breath is shortening, and your body is entering fight or flight, 30 seconds might as well be 30 minutes. You can't walk when you can't breathe. You can't remember a combination lock code when your brain is screaming for oxygen. That's not a reasonable alternative. That's a death trap with a padlock. I said, Grant, 30 seconds is too long during an acute episode. My airways can close in 90 seconds. By the time I walk to the break room, open a combination lock, and get the inhaler out, I could be unconscious. This isn't about convenience. It's about whether I can breathe. He said, and again, I'm being careful to remember this accurately because it matters. Jake, I've managed a lot of people with a lot of different needs. I think sometimes we overestimate the severity of these things. You've been fine for 5 years. You'll be fine with the inhaler in the locker. We overestimate the severity. A man with 0 medical training, 0 experience with respiratory conditions, and 3 weeks of knowing me just told me I was overestimating my own disease. The disease I've been managing for 30 years. The disease that put me in the hospital twice. I felt something shift in that moment. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. The kind of clarity you get when you realize that the person you're talking to isn't going to change their mind because they don't think there's a problem. And when someone doesn't see the problem, you stop explaining and start documenting. I said, Grant, I need to escalate this to HR. He said, you're welcome to, but the policy stands until I hear otherwise. Pause. Captain Clean Desk just told a guy with severe asthma, documented on file, accommodated for 5 years, to walk to a locker room to get his rescue inhaler during an asthma attack. This man thinks tidiness is more important than breathing. He thinks desk aesthetics trump federal disability law. He literally said, the locker is just down the hall. Like the problem is geography and not, the inability to breathe. Grant, my brother in middle management, the ADA isn't a suggestion, it's a law. And walk to the break room isn't an accommodation, it's a liability. This man is about to find out that clean desk and clean conscience are very different things. And he's about to lose both. I want to be clear about something. I didn't want to fight this. I didn't want drama. I wanted what I'd had for 5 years. An inhaler on my desk, and a manager who understood why it needed to be there. That's all. But Grant had decided that his policy was more important than my lungs. And when someone decides that, you don't have the luxury of being passive. You escalate. Because passive people don't escalate. And passive people sometimes end up in hospitals. I went to HR the next day. Spoke with a woman named Danielle who handles workplace accommodations. I explained the situation. I showed her my file, which documented my condition, my accommodation, and Patricia's approval. Danielle said, I'll talk to Grant. Your accommodation should be honored. A day later, I got an email from Grant. Not from Danielle, from Grant. It said, Hi Jake, after consulting with HR, I've decided to make a modified arrangement for your situation. Your inhaler can be stored in my office, which is closer to the team area than the break room. You can come to my office to retrieve it whenever needed. I think this is a fair compromise. His office. He wanted me to store my life-saving medication in his office, an office that's locked when he's not there, an office that's 20 feet further from my desk than my desk is from my desk. This wasn't a compromise. It was a power move disguised as accommodation. He wanted to control my access to my own medication. Why? I genuinely don't know. Maybe he thought I was exaggerating. Maybe he'd never seen an asthma attack. Maybe the clean desk policy was his baby and he couldn't stand anyone getting an exception. Whatever the reason, it was wrong. And it almost killed me. I replied to the email and CC'd Danielle. Grant, I appreciate the suggestion, but my medical accommodation requires my inhaler to be within immediate reach at my desk. This was the arrangement for 5 years and it's documented in my file. I'm requesting that the original accommodation be reinstated. Grant didn't reply. Not that day. Not the next day. Not ever. The email sat there, unanswered, for 3 days. During those 3 days, I noticed that Grant had started walking past my desk more frequently, looking at it, at the inhaler still sitting on the surface. I'd see him glance at it and then look away, like it personally offended him. Like a tiny plastic medical device on a desk in a cubicle in a back-office financial firm was somehow undermining his authority. That inhaler cost $12 at the pharmacy. Grant's need to move it was about to cost the company 6 figures. But he didn't know that yet. 3 days later, a Wednesday around 2 p.m., I was at my desk working on a quarterly reconciliation report. The office was quiet. Half the team was at lunch. I felt the familiar tightness start in my chest. The first warning sign. My body has a system. Tightness first, then shallow breathing, then the wheeze. I have maybe 90 seconds from the first tightness to full restriction if it's a bad episode. I reached for my desk drawer, where my inhaler always was, where it had been for 5 years. It was gone. The drawer was empty, cleaned out. My inhaler, my personal items, my phone charger, my granola bars, all removed. Grant had apparently had maintenance clean the desks during lunch, per the policy. My inhaler was in a locker in the break room, 45 feet down the hall, behind a combination lock I hadn't memorized because I never needed to, because my inhaler was supposed to be at my desk. I stood up, my chest was getting tighter. I walked toward the hall, made it about 15 feet before the wheeze started, the high-pitched, narrow sound that means the airways are closing. I grabbed the doorframe of the conference room. My coworker Bryce, who sits 2 desks over, saw me and immediately came over. He said, "Jake, where's your inhaler?" I pointed toward the break room. He ran, full sprint, down the hall, into the break room, and he didn't know my locker combination. He ran back. "What's the code?" I couldn't speak. I was holding the doorframe with both hands, trying to get air through a passage that felt like it was the width of a coffee straw. Bryce called 911. Then he found Grant, who was in a meeting, and told him what was happening. Grant came out of the meeting, saw me in the hallway, and said, according to Bryce, because I don't remember this part clearly, "Is he okay? Should we call someone?" Bryce said, "I already called 911. His inhaler was removed from his desk. Where is it?" Grant said, "It should be in his locker." Bryce said, "He can't get to his locker. He can't breathe." The paramedics arrived in about 7 minutes. They administered a nebulizer treatment in the hallway. My oxygen levels were dangerously low by the time they got there. They took me to the hospital. I spent 4 hours in the ER, oxygen, steroids, monitoring. The attending physician asked me what happened. I told him my inhaler had been removed from my desk against my documented medical accommodation. He looked at me, looked at the chart, and said, "That's not a workplace policy issue. That's negligence." He was right. Wait! His co-worker sprinted to the break room to find the inhaler and couldn't open the locker because he didn't know the combination, while Jake was in the hallway struggling to breathe. Because Captain Clean Desk removed a medical device from a disabled employee's desk for aesthetics. And when Grant came out of his meeting and saw Jake gasping for air in the hallway, his response was, "Should we call someone? Should we call someone?" The man's airway is closing in real time, and you're asking if you should call someone? Let me help you, Grant. Yes, call someone. Call 911, then call HR, then call a lawyer. Because you're going to need all three. The attending physician called it negligence. I'm calling it the dumbest clean desk policy in the history of organized workspaces. You organized a man right into an ambulance. Congratulations. I called an employment attorney from the hospital bed. A woman named Catherine Reeves who specializes in ADA violations and workplace disability discrimination. My buddy Connor had used her for a different issue years ago and said she was the kind of lawyer who makes companies lose sleep. I told her everything. The accommodation, the clean desk policy, the emails, the episode, the hospitalization. She said, "Jake, this is one of the clearest ADA violations I've seen in 10 years of practice. They had documentation of your condition and your accommodation. A new manager overrode it unilaterally, without medical consultation or HR approval, and the result was a medical emergency requiring hospitalization. That's not a gray area." She filed a formal complaint with the EEOC within the week. She also sent a demand letter to the company's legal department outlining the violation, the medical consequences, and the requested remedies. Reinstatement of the original accommodation, full coverage of my medical expenses, compensatory damages for the physical and emotional harm caused by the episode, and a formal policy review to prevent this from happening to anyone else. I should mention what happened with my family during this period. My mom, who went through the school district lawsuit when I was 15, was livid. Not the yelling kind of livid, the cold, focused, "I've done this before" kind. She called me the day after the hospital and said, "Jake, tell me you got a lawyer." I said, "I called Catherine Reeves from the hospital bed." She said, "Good. Don't talk to anyone at the company without her. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. And save every email." That's my mom. She's been through this. She knows the playbook. My girlfriend at the time, Cassie, drove to the hospital when Bryce called her. She was there when I was still on the nebulizer. She held my hand and didn't say anything for about 20 minutes. Just sat there. When I could finally talk normally, I said, "I'm okay." She said, "You're not okay, but you will be." She was right about both parts. The company's response was fast, unusually fast, which Catherine said meant they were scared. Their attorney reached out within 3 days to discuss a resolution. The company did not defend Grant's actions. In fact, from what Catherine told me, the company's own legal team was livid. They'd reviewed the email chain, which I'd saved every word of, and determined that Grant had acted outside his authority by overriding a documented ADA accommodation without HR approval. I heard through Danielle, off the record, that the meeting where they fired Grant lasted about 12 minutes. The company's head of legal was present. Grant was told that his actions constituted a direct violation of the ADA, that the company's exposure was significant because of his documented refusal to honor the accommodation, and that his employment was being terminated effective immediately. Grant apparently said, "I was trying to create a consistent standard." The head of legal apparently said, "The standard is, don't remove medical devices from disabled employees' desks." That's a pretty straightforward standard. Grant was terminated about 2 weeks after the episode, not quietly reassigned, not given an opportunity to resign. Terminated. His clean desk policy was rescinded the same day. The lockers in the break room were removed. Every personal item was returned to every desk. My inhaler went back to my drawer, where it belongs, where it always belonged. During the legal process, I learned something interesting about Grant. He'd done this before. Not the exact same thing, not the ADA violation specifically, but a pattern. At his previous role in the corporate reporting division, he'd implemented a similar clean desk policy, and it had resulted in 2 formal complaints from employees who had personal items removed without consent. One was a woman who kept family photos at her desk because she was dealing with the loss of a parent, and the photos helped her get through the day. Grant had the photos removed and put in storage. She complained to HR. Grant received a coaching conversation, which is corporate for a slap on the wrist with a wet noodle. Nobody escalated. Nobody sued. So Grant learned nothing. He just moved to a new department and did it again. Except this time, instead of photos, it was a rescue inhaler. And instead of a coaching conversation, it was a termination and a 6-figure settlement. Patricia, my retired former manager, heard about what happened through the grapevine. She called me at home. She said, "Jake, I wrote that note in your file specifically so this wouldn't happen." I said, "I know, he didn't read it." She said, "Figures." Then she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm alive." She said, "Then everything else can be fixed." Patricia is one of the best people I've ever worked for. She's retired now, growing tomatoes in her backyard and volunteering at the library. I send her a Christmas card every year. This year, I'm including a copy of the settlement letter. Redacted, obviously. But she deserves to know her note mattered. The settlement came through about 4 months later. I can't disclose the exact amount. There's an NDA. But I'll say this. It had 6 digits, and the first one was comfortable. It covered my medical expenses, about $8,000 in hospital bills, ambulance, and follow-up care, my legal fees, and a significant compensatory amount for the physical harm, emotional distress, and, this is the part that mattered most to me, the willful disregard of a known medical condition. Yo, 6-figure settlement. Grant fired. Clean desk policy rescinded. Lockers removed. Inhaler back on the desk. Catherine Reeves earned her retainer in 1 phone call. This is what accountability looks like when someone with a documented disability gets their accommodation stripped by a guy in a vest who cares more about desk symmetry than employee safety. Captain Clean Desk organized himself right out of a job and organized Jake right into a settlement check. The irony is almost too perfect. Grant wanted a clean desk. He got a clean exit. No personal items to pack up because his office was already spotless. That's malicious compliance from the universe itself. I'm standing and clapping. You can't see me, but I'm doing it. I want to talk about the aftermath because the legal stuff is only part of the story. The medical part was scary. I'd had asthma episodes before, but this one was different because it was preventable. Completely, entirely, totally preventable. My inhaler was 20 feet from my face in a locker I couldn't open because a man I'd known for 3 weeks decided it was more important for my desk to be clean than for me to be alive. I spent 2 days after the hospital feeling shaky, not just physically but mentally. The kind of shaky where your body remembers what happened before your brain processes it. I'd be sitting on my couch and my chest would tighten for no reason, and I'd grab for my pocket. Phantom tightness. My doctor, not the ER doctor, my regular one, said it was a stress response. My body was expecting it to happen again. I took a week off after the episode. When I came back, the team was different with me. Not in a bad way. In an, "Oh God, we watched you almost die in the hallway" way. Bryce, the coworker who sprinted to the break room, came to my desk on my first day back and said, "I bought 3 inhalers. They're in my desk, the conference room, and the kitchen." He doesn't have asthma. He bought them just in case. That man. I owe Bryce more than I can express. He ran when it mattered. Not everyone would. Danielle from HR came to see me too. She was visibly upset. She said, "Jake, I talked to Grant after your initial complaint. I told him to honor the accommodation. He told me he would." She showed me her notes. She documented the conversation. Grant had lied. He told Danielle he would reinstate the accommodation and then did the exact opposite. He'd removed the items from my desk during lunch when nobody was watching. In direct contradiction of what he told HR, Danielle's notes became part of the legal case. Grant didn't just override a policy, he told HR he'd comply and then didn't. That's not ignorance, that's defiance. The company also made some changes after the settlement. They implemented a formal process for medical accommodations that requires sign-off from both HR and the employee's physician before any manager can modify an existing accommodation. They added ADA training to the onboarding process for new managers. And they put up small signs in the break room and common areas that say, if you witness a medical emergency, call 911 immediately. I don't love that my near-death experience was the reason for the signs, but if it helps someone else, I'll take it. My current situation, I'm still at the company. Same desk, same role. New manager. A guy named Phil who, on his first day, came to my desk, looked at my inhaler, and said, "That stays right there. If anyone ever has a problem with it, come to me first." I said, "Thanks, Phil." He said, "Don't thank me. That's just basic human decency." Phil gets it. Grant didn't. The difference between a good manager and a dangerous one is sometimes just that, basic human decency. Final update. Catherine told me after the settlement was signed that she'd handled about 60 ADA cases in her career. She said, most of them are ambiguous, gray areas where the company arguably did their best but fell short. This one was black and white. Your manager was told about your condition. He was told about your accommodation. HR instructed him to honor it. He said he would. And then he removed your medication from your desk. That's not a gray area. That's a checked box on every form I've ever filed. She also said, "Jake, the fact that you saved every email, including the one where Grant said the locker is just down the hall, is what made this case airtight. Most people delete work emails. You saved them. That's the difference between winning and hoping. I used part of the settlement to pay off my car. I put the rest in savings. Nothing flashy. I'm not the revenge check kind of guy. I'm the my airways almost closed in a hallway because of a clean desk policy, and I want to make sure that never happens again kind of guy." My mom called me the day after the settlement was finalized. She said, "Jake, you could have died." I said, "I know, Mom." She said, "This is the second time someone took your inhaler." I said, "Yeah, but this time, I had a better lawyer." She laughed, but I could tell she was crying behind the laugh. Moms can do both at the same time. Bryce, my coworker, the sprinter, and I have become close friends since the incident. We go to lunch every Thursday. He always checks my desk when he walks past, just a glance, making sure the inhaler is there. I've told him he doesn't need to do that. He does it anyway. Some people just show up. Bryce shows up, and he runs. The emergency inhaler Bryce bought for the conference room is still there. Nobody's touched it, but it's there. And every time I walk past it, I think about two things. The 30 seconds Grant said it would take to walk to the break room, and the 7 minutes it actually took for the paramedics to arrive. The difference between those two numbers is the space where I almost died, and the space where I finally understood that some people will put policy above people. And when they do, you need a lawyer, a coworker who can sprint, and an inhaler within arm's reach. Would you have filed the complaint, or would you have tried to handle it internally? Some people have told me I should have just put the inhaler in my pocket. And yeah, I started doing that too, after. But the principle matters. If a company documents an accommodation and a manager overrides it, that's not a desk problem. That's a rights problem. And rights don't belong in a locker. Neither do inhalers. Neither do people's dignity. Some things need to be within reach, always. Cassie and I are still together, by the way. She bought me a new inhaler holder for my desk, one of those little silicone grips that attaches to the side of a monitor. It's bright orange. You can see it from across the room. She said, "Now everyone knows it's there, including the next Grant." I love that woman. She thinks ahead. She also bought Bryce a gift card to a running store because, and I quote, "That man earned new shoes with that sprint." Bryce used it. He got bright green ones. He wears them to work sometimes. I told him they're obnoxious. He said, "They're fast." He's not wrong. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention. After the lockers were removed from the break room, the space was converted into a small seating area with a couch and a table. My team uses it for lunch now. Bryce put a fake sign on the wall that says, "Grant Memorial Lounge," in honor of the worst idea in company history. Management hasn't taken it down. I think they agree. The break room is now the most comfortable room in the building. We put a coffee machine in there too. A good one, not the cheap pod kind. I like to think of it as the universe's remodeling job. Grant wanted a clean desk area. He got a lounge with a couch and a coffee machine. The desks are still messy, and the inhalers are still on them. The system works. Anyway, my inhaler is on my desk right now, right next to my keyboard, where it's been for 5 years and 3 weeks and 1 hospital visit and 1 settlement check and 1 very fast sprint by a coworker named Bryce. It's not going anywhere, and neither am I. 5 years of peace, 3 weeks of chaos, 1 hospital visit, 1 settlement, 1 coworker who runs like his life depends on it because someone else's did, and a $12 piece of plastic that a man in a vest thought was worth losing his job over. Life's weird, but I can breathe, and that's enough. Here's what I'll say about Jake. The man had every reason to be angry. He almost died because of a clean desk policy. But instead of rage, he got organized. He saved the emails. He called the attorney. He let the system work. And the system, for once, actually worked. Grant's gone. The policy's gone. The money's in the bank. And the inhaler is on the desk, where it always should have been. Drop a comment. Clean desk policies. Organizational necessity or power trip in disguise? And if you've ever had a workplace accommodation overridden by a manager who didn't understand it, you're not alone. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.